My Archrival Got Me Pregnant Episode 5. As the sky gradually dimmed, the scent of golden osmanthus began to waft through the branches around Jiwa Hospital, sweet and persistent, signaling the approach of Mid-Autumn Festival. After being promoted to attending physician, Yu Sang moved into office No. 2, right next to Julian Grant. When he returned from rounds, stretching his back, he noticed Lucas Shaw's desk was empty, but Julian was still working. He knew these two usually left the office one right after the other. While everyone else scrambled to get off work early, the two of them acted like leaving first meant losing some invisible competition. If one stayed, the other stayed too. So Yu Sang asked casually, "Julian, how come Lucas left so early today?" Normally, Julian wouldn't even register such idle chatter when he was focused, but for some reason, something about that sentence struck a nerve, and he actually responded. He went home to blow up the kitchen. What? Yu Sang blinked. Julian glanced at the clock on his desk. Lucas had been gone for 1 hour and 48 minutes. You really think he's cooking? Yu Sang asked, amused. Julian gave a flat reply. Just a guess. He checked the clock again. 1 hour and 49 minutes. Could be, Yu Sang continued, playing along. He usually eats at the hospital, but left before dinner today. Maybe he really is cooking. He paused. Hey, wanna grab dinner together? There's a new Sichuan place near the hospital. Ting recommended it, said it's great. Julian hesitated. You already ate? No, then let's go. You love Sichuan food. Julian pressed his lips together. His phone screen still showed his last chat with Lucas. Lucas had reminded him to go home for dinner. Julian had replied, still working. Strange. He'd already turned Lucas down. Why was he still hesitating? He locked his phone, pulled off his lab coat, and threw on his windbreaker. All right, let's go. The restaurant was new. The menu and decor bathed in vibrant reds and spicy aromas. But while Yu Sang dug in with gusto, lips slick with chili oil, Julian found the food bland and unappealing. He couldn't shake an odd feeling, like he'd lost his footing. Halfway through the meal, he put down his chopsticks and called the waiter over. Can I get this set meal to go? You're packing it? Yu Sang asked. Someone at home? Julian replied with a distracted Yu Sang immediately perked up with a grin. Julian, are you hiding? Someone at home? Julian knew there was no avoiding Yu Sang's nosy curiosity, so he deflected. My cousin. I thought you were an only child. Distant cousin from my hometown. Then why not invite him out to eat? The food's gonna be cold by the time you get it home. Yu Sang frowned. Guy came all this way to visit and you're feeding him leftovers? Julian didn't reply. He glanced at the packed meal. His so-called cousin was probably better off eating this than anything Lucas cooked. He wasn't bringing back dinner. He was bringing salvation. He's shy, Julian muttered, caught up in the lie. Doesn't like going out. Yu Sang's expression turned sympathetic. In his mind, this distant cousin became a big, quiet farmer type, with rough hands and an even rougher accent, totally unsuited for the bright lights of a city. Meanwhile, Julian drove home with the takeout box on the passenger seat, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt guilty. The guilt had begun the moment Lucas left the office. It had grown stronger every minute since. Julian arrived home, unlocked the door, and stepped into silence. The living room was empty. He placed the food on the table, just as a noise came from the study. Lucas stepped out, having just opened the door. He glanced at the clock, then looked directly at Julian. Julian's heart skipped a beat. Before he could say anything, Lucas raised an eyebrow. Back already? I thought you'd wait at least another hour before facing me. No need to explain, Lucas added. I know you too well. Julian glanced at the empty dining table. Did you eat? Nope. Lucas walked into the kitchen, scooped 2 bowls of rice from the cooker, and popped his dishes into the microwave. A moment later, he brought everything out to the table. "I was waiting for you," he said, handing Julian a pair of chopsticks. "Roommates like me? 1 in a million." Julian looked at the chopsticks, hesitated, then asked, "You're sure this is edible?" Lucas leaned his cheek on one hand and smiled lazily. "I've practiced this dish 10 times in the past 2 days. Come on, I waited all night for you. Just try it." Julian was still doubtful when Lucas picked up a piece of pepper and brought it to his mouth. "Ah," he said, like feeding a kid. The warm, spicy sauce touched his lips. Julian paused, then resigned himself and took a bite. The taste surprised him, rich and layered, with just the right heat. The tiger skin peppers actually tasted good. Lucas grinned and popped the rest of the piece into his mouth. "So?" Julian, stunned, looked down at the plate. "You really made this? Don't believe me? Come home early next time and watch me cook it." "Yourself?" Julian studied him. "Still mad?" "Dr. Grant is way too busy for my feelings to matter," Lucas replied with a dramatic sigh. "Sure, last time the food was awful, but this time I've gone all in. So, will you come home for dinner again?" The warm light from the chandelier gave Lucas's eyes a golden glow. That familiar glint returned, smug and inviting, but also sincere. And in that moment, Julian realized he cared. He cared how Lucas felt. The moment he saw Lucas wasn't mad, still smiling, still being ridiculous. All that guilt he'd carried melted away. Julian glanced at the takeout box. In hindsight, it felt unnecessary. Lucas followed his gaze. His smile faded as he realized what it was. "Julian, that's just mean." Julian blinked. "What? You thought my cooking would suck so bad you brought backup dinner? Seriously?" Lucas's eyes widened in mock horror. "What, to let me taste the difference and feel the sting?" Julian didn't bother explaining. He simply picked up another pepper, ate it with some rice, and said quietly, "Restaurant wasn't as good as yours." Lucas froze mid-tantrum. Did Julian just compliment him? That had to be a first. His brain took a few seconds to reboot. His eye twitched. Julian said he liked Lucas's cooking. Lucas felt like he was floating. His legs barely touched the ground. "What else do you want to eat?" he blurted. "I'll learn it." Julian looked at him, and, despite himself, a smile crept to the corner of his lips. He quickly lowered his head, scooping more rice to hide it. It was strange. His nausea had been relentless for weeks. But tonight, for the first time, he was eating happily. No gagging, no discomfort. Half the plate gone. Lucas noticed. "Julian," he said gently, "you look really good when you smile." Julian gave up trying to hide it. He looked up, the laughter in his eyes evident. "So when I'm not smiling, I'm ugly?" It was the first time Lucas Shaw had heard Julian Grant tease him like that. He was stunned for a moment before replying, "You look good too." "Half-hearted," Julian said. "I'm serious," Lucas answered. Julian couldn't be bothered to argue. The tiger skin peppers were surprisingly appetizing, and he had no interest in diverting his attention from the meal to Lucas. So he didn't notice that Lucas had quietly set down his chopsticks and was now watching him eat, like he was hoping to see something bloom on Julian's face. "Didn't think you liked this dish so much," Lucas said suddenly. Julian looked up, surprised. Lucas propped his head on one hand, his gaze tinged with nostalgia. "You know, Julian, when I was little, my favorite dish was my grandfather's tiger skin peppers." He curved his lips into a rare smile, reminiscing about his family. "I heard my grandpa only learned to make them because of my grandma." He glanced at Julian, then continued. "My grandma was a beauty in her youth, gorgeous, but with a temper. And my grandpa, well, he was the classic henpecked husband. Later, someone told him that if you cook tiger skin peppers for your wife, even the fiercest woman would mellow out. So he went to a restaurant, found a mentor, and learned the recipe just to please her. But turns out, not only did the peppers not tame her temper, she ended up loving the dish. From then on, she made my grandpa cook it for her. For the rest of their lives. Lucas chuckled. Temperaments don't change easily, Julian commented. Nope. And honestly, my grandma's temper was all my grandpa's fault. He spoiled her rotten. Not that he minded. Lucas's lips quirked into a fond smile. When I was a kid, my grandpa used to say I had to learn how to cook this dish too. Said I might inherit his afraid of wife genes and needed to be prepared, start practicing early so I could cook it for the one I loved someday. He looked over at Julian, eyes soft with memory and a teasing lilt. But I never expected the first time I'd make it. It'd be for you. Cough, cough. Julian, who had been eating contentedly, suddenly choked hard. Lucas instantly snapped out of his nostalgia, reaching out to pat his back. Slow down. The pepper seeds can be sharp. It took a while for Julian to recover. He put down his chopsticks, wiped his mouth calmly and expressionlessly. I'm done. Lucas assumed he'd been spooked by the choking. Don't let that scare you off. Just be careful. It's like eating fish. Spit out the bones and it's fine. Julian shook his head firmly, grabbed his tablet, and left for the study. Without looking back. Picky eater, Lucas muttered under his breath. He glanced at Julian's retreating figure, then looked down at the half-finished plate of peppers. Sighing to himself, he murmured, All right, next time I'll remember to remove the seeds. He stood up, cleaned the table, loaded the dishes into the dishwasher, and wiped the table down with disinfectant. Just as he wrung out the cloth, his phone rang. Lucas? Do you remember me? The voice was vaguely familiar. Bin Huang? That's right. Lucas frowned, wondering why Bin was calling him. Bin had been their classmate in med school, though never particularly close. After graduation, instead of practicing medicine, he became a pharmaceutical rep. Word was, he was doing pretty well. Smart guy, slick, talker. But since Jihua Hospital had fixed supplier contracts, Lucas rarely crossed paths with him anymore. Bin quickly got to the point. I heard you and Julian are both at Jihua now. Congrats on making deputy chief. Lucas chuckled and returned the pleasantries, flattering him right back, until Bin was practically glowing. Then Bin said, Listen, I want to bring my girlfriend in for a termination. Think you can help me find a good doctor? It was a personal matter, and technically none of Lucas's business. But Bin was known for flaunting his relationship online. Even someone like Lucas, who barely checked his alumni group chat, had seen the guy's constant PDA updates. Everyone in their class knew Bin had been in a long, devoted relationship for years and was planning to marry her. So Lucas couldn't help asking, Didn't you two have a great relationship? Terminations weren't minor procedures. They took a toll. Unless the couple was child-free by choice or not ready to start a family, there was usually no reason to go through with it. What does being in love have to do with it? Bin said. She's from an average family, no connections, can't help my career. Now she wants a $100,000 as bride price. She should really take a good look at herself. I'm not desperate. There's no shortage of women. If I want a kid, I'll have one anytime. I don't need hers. He said it so matter-of-factly. You get it right, Lucas? If I had a kid with her, I'd be shackled for life. Lucas's smile vanished by the first sentence. He hit record mid-call. By the end, his brows had drawn into a hard line. Do you even hear yourself? Lucas asked coldly. You call yourself a man? What's that supposed to mean? Bin was clearly pissed. It means you're heartless, Lucas said, taking a long breath. Since you clearly don't believe in responsibility, then I sincerely wish you erectile dysfunction and permanent infertility. Bin hung up before Lucas could finish his poetic curse. Unbelievable, Lucas muttered at the disconnected screen. Meanwhile, in the study, Julian frowned at a new message on his phone. Bin Huang. Hey Julian. Got a sec? Bin Huang. Do you know a good OBGYN for a termination procedure? Julian typed a few words. Send me the patient's WeChat. I'll contact her directly. Bin Huang. You're the best. Then Bin sent over a contact card. You're the best? Julian found that a little strange, but didn't overthink it. He didn't know that Bin had already called Lucas and gotten absolutely wrecked. This time, Bin had learned his lesson and reached out to Julian via WeChat instead. Julian added the contact. The woman accepted quickly. Julian sent over basic instructions and a list of OBGYNs. Just as he hit send, he heard a knock. He glanced at the door. Come in. Ever since they'd moved in together, Lucas had made a habit of knocking. Before entering any room, Julian was in. Technically, it was polite, but for some reason, Julian didn't find it comforting. If anything, it felt a little distant. He pushed the thought aside as Lucas entered. What's got you so worked up? Julian asked, noticing his expression. Bin Huang contacted you? Julian looked up. Lucas opened the voice recording and played it. Julian's expression darkened. When it ended, Julian said, "Send it to me." He edited the audio, removing Lucas's voice, and sent the final MP3 to the girl Bin had referred. She didn't reply after that. Maybe the recording had left her too stunned. Julian handed his phone to Lucas, who read the chat thread with rising fury. By the time he finished, he realized he was still wearing an apron. Julian didn't allow street clothes in the bedroom. Thankfully, Julian hadn't noticed yet. Lucas quickly smoothed his expression and said, "I'll go change." Julian, who had noticed the apron the second Lucas walked in, he shook his head and turned back to his phone. After a moment's hesitation, he sent the girl his personal contact and a final message. "If you need help, you can reach me directly." A red exclamation point popped up. She had blocked him. Julian stared at the screen for a while, then deleted the unsent message and put his phone away. He didn't plan to tell Lucas, no need to ruin his mood. Lucas came back carrying a plate of sliced apples. Julian picked up a piece and handed it to him, then casually changed the subject. Tang K said, "The last checkup looked good. NT scan came back normal. The apple was crisp and sweet." Lucas chewed thoughtfully and handed the fork back. "I know." Julian raised an eyebrow. "He told me," Lucas said. "Also asked when we're scheduling the Down syndrome screening. Considering your unique condition, he recommended another ultrasound." Again? Julian had already had more ultrasounds than most pregnant women. Lucas nodded. "Yeah, a bit excessive. But he said after the 3D scan, around 5 or 6 months, if everything looks normal, we can return to the usual schedule, just to be safe." He added, "I checked your calendar. I booked an appointment for the night after tomorrow. We'll do the scan then. Blood work in the morning. I'll take you. No water before the test. Afterward, I'll treat you to breakfast." Julian liked drinking water in the morning, but didn't usually eat. Since Lucas moved in, unless he had the day off, he always woke earlier. Then Julian went downstairs to get breakfast and waited until Julian finished eating. Over time, Julian had developed a new habit. Breakfast was now part of his routine, but that wasn't what bothered him. Why didn't Tangka tell me himself? He was sure Tang hadn't mentioned any of this to him. "Probably because I'm more reliable," Lucas said, already grinning. The rage from earlier had completely vanished. "You're always preaching about following doctor's orders, but look at you. Your stomach's a mess. If it weren't for me..." Julian sat up and yanked the apple tray out of his hands. "Hey, I wasn't done." "Who said it was for you?" Julian locked the study door. Lucas, still chewing the piece Julian had handed him, stood outside. pounding on the door. "Julian, that's not fair. You gave it to me." Inside, Julian calmly called Tangki to scold him for switching sides. Lucas, realizing the door wasn't opening, pulled out his ultimate weapon, the boombox speaker that could rival any grandmother's public square. Dance routine. Moments later, the house exploded with the iconic spine-tingling wail of "Ah" from the legend of the White Snake. It blasted through the entire apartment, flooding past the study door and piercing Julian's ears. Even Tang Ke, on the other end of the call, flinched and pulled the phone away. "What the hell is that, Julian? You reviving the Tang dynasty in there?" Tang Ke still didn't know they lived together. "If you must blast old theme songs," he shouted, "at least turn it down. I get that your place has good soundproofing, but my eardrums aren't." Soundproof. The walls trembled with the force of the chorus. Julian could barely hear his own thoughts. He stared at the untouched plate of apples, sighed deeply, hung up on. Tang Ke opened the door and hurled the entire plate at Lucas's head. And just like that, the brief truce collapsed. Apparently, peace between them could never last more than 3 seconds. Inside a quiet ultrasound room at a private hospital, 3 men, one lying down, one sitting, and one standing, shared an atmosphere that was both awkward and charged. Julian Grant lay on the examination bed, shirt lifted to expose his now slightly rounded abdomen. Lucas Shaw stood nearby, a bandage on his forehead, arms folded as he stared intently at the ultrasound screen. Meanwhile, Dr. Tang Ke held the transducer in his hand, moving it across Julian's skin, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. "Julian," Tang muttered, "I lost 2 nights of sleep just because you played me that damn song. Every time I close my eyes, I hear those 4 brain-melting lines of, 'Ah.'" Julian smirked. "I've been living with that for over a week." "No way you've had insomnia," Lucas chimed in. "You've been sleeping like a baby." The room fell silent. 2 pairs of eyes turned to him simultaneously, one filled with curious shock and juicy gossip, the other burning with murderous intent. Lucas froze. "Ahem." He waved it off. "Let's focus on the exam." Clearly shaken, Tang tried to pull himself together, but he couldn't help. Glancing between the 2 men, "You two, we're not living together," Julian said flatly. "I didn't say you were," Tang stammered, his eyes trembling. Julian reached for the transducer in his hand. "If you're not doing it, I'll do it myself. I've got it." Tang snapped back to focus, hastily resuming the ultrasound. At 4 months, the fetus's organs were largely developed, and the genitalia were now clearly distinguishable, while the last scan had made it seemed like a girl. This time it was nearly 80% confirmed the baby was indeed a little girl. The girl's head appeared on the screen. Tang began measuring the biparietal diameter. Lucas leaned in for a better look and said cheerfully, "She looks like me. Gonna be a beauty." Julian rolled his eyes. "That's a 2D ultrasound, not a 4D scan." "How exactly does she look like you?" He stared at the screen for a few more seconds and muttered, "If anything, she looks like me." Tang never thought he'd live to hear these 2 academic overachievers bicker like schoolboys over which one the baby resembled more. The scene was so ridiculous he couldn't help but snort with laughter. Unfortunately, both men turned to glare at him. "What are you laughing at?" His smile froze instantly. How had this happened? Weren't these 2 supposed to be rivals? Wasn't Tang Ke supposed to be Julian's closest friend? So why did it feel like they were the couple, and he was the outsider? Unacceptable. Tang was about to defend his place when Lucas pointed at the screen. "The baby's right arm isn't showing. Looks like it's tucked behind her." "Back. Julian, want to walk around and come back for a clearer view?" Tang checked the screen. Lucas was right. Common enough in prenatal scans. Probably nothing to worry about. But until the baby was born, no one could be entirely sure. There was always a small chance it could mean something. Julian lowered his shirt and got up. "All right, I'll walk with you, Lucas offered casually, following him down the hall. Tang stared at their retreating backs. Dazed, a question mark slowly formed over his head. Last time, Julian had delayed a scan against medical advice, so Tang had looped in Lucas to keep things on track. In Tang's mind, Lucas was just a tool, someone to nag Julian into showing up, maybe help with the delivery later. But now, that tool was looking suspiciously like it was replacing him. Tang gathered his instruments in a daze, still brooding. This is definitely not logical. The private hospital Tang worked at was a high-end facility in a city. The grounds were lush, featuring a full garden along the riverbank. In October, the wind off the river was crisp and cool. Reeds and cattails waved gently in the breeze, forming a white mist of motion. Beside the walking path was a bike lane. Occasionally someone pedaled by. Twinkling lights dangled from the tree branches overhead, softening the night. No wonder more doctors are switching to private hospitals every year, Lucas said, taking in the view. It's so nice here, I almost want to quit and join. Most doctors walked fast out of habit. Julian rarely had a chance to stroll like this. He looked up at the osmanthus blossoms in the trees, glowing like stars. Feel free, he said, giving Lucas a sideways glance. I won't stop you. No can do, Lucas replied. If you don't leave, I can't leave. Pride's at stake. He slung an arm around Julian's shoulder. The air was peaceful, the night easy. Julian didn't shake him off. A couple passed them, pushing a toddler in a stroller. A tiny bell chimed. Softly. Julian, Lucas said suddenly. Have you calculated the due date? Julian looked out at the moonlit river, silent. Lucas did the math himself. April 1st. You're kidding. He laughed. Our daughter's due on April Fool's Day? What kind of poetic joke is that? Julian deadpanned. Just proves that our whole relationship is a cosmic joke. Lucas wasn't discouraged. Hey, what should we name her? I was thinking Shaw Grant. Has a nice ring to it. Combines both our names. Julian shot him a look. It would be Grant Shaw. Shaw Grant. Grant Shaw. Shaw Grant, Julian declared. It'll be Grant Shaw. That doesn't even sound like a name, Lucas argued. Shaw just sounds like a last name. No one names their kid Shaw. Then change your last name, Julian said. If Shaw doesn't sound like a first name, that's your problem. It's still going to be Grant something. Lucas sighed. Fine. What if we don't use either last name? She's due on April Fool's Day. Let's call her April Jest. Julian stared at him like he'd lost his mind. With Lucas's naming skills, their daughter would never forgive him. Jesters are wise, Lucas insisted. It's a brilliant name. Julian raised an eyebrow. Maybe I should buy a durian tonight. What is it with you and durians lately? Julian calmly brushed Lucas's arm off his shoulder, glanced at the bandage on Lucas's head and said, Durians hurt more than apples when thrown. Lucas. With Lucas finally quiet, Julian could enjoy the city lights in peace. A city really was beautiful. Julian had loved it ever since the day he stepped off the train with his suitcase. And now, years had passed. He'd gone from student to doctor, from alone to 3 of them. A child, a partner, a home. Everything had come together in the most ridiculous, accidental way possible. And yet, somehow, it worked. Like the moon above a city, pockmarked, imperfect, but still radiant and steady. A fire burning not just with ambition, but with warmth. Let's head back. The night air was getting cooler, and they still had work to do. Julian had a department presentation to prepare. Lucas had student papers to review and a lecture to plan. Lucas tugged Julian's sleeve. Julian glanced down. Lucas let go immediately. Forget the full name for now, Lucas said. I've got the perfect nickname. Moonlight danced across his grin. Let's call her Smiley. Julian raised an eyebrow. Why? Lucas looked him straight in the eye. Because your smile is beautiful, and you never smile. So she'll be a reminder to make you smile more. The breeze tousled Lucas's hair. His peach blossom eyes were warm, lazy, and a little mischievous, like a romantic who accidentally meant every word. Julian's heart fluttered, just a little. He looked away and started walking toward the hospital. Lucas followed. So? Yes or no? Julian didn't answer. Lucas kept at it, repeating softly, yes or no? Julian turned, annoyed, ready to snap. Just as Lucas pulled out his ultimate weapon, a portable speaker, the haunting wail of the legend of the white snake filled the riverside path. People turned to stare. Julian snatched the speaker and tried every button. Nothing worked, so he slammed it to the ground. Finally, the music stopped. Flushed with embarrassment, he tossed the pieces into a trash can. What is wrong with you? He hissed. Lucas, unfazed, pulled out another speaker. I'm channeling Jia Baoyu, he said cheerfully. You be Lin Dayu. Smash. As many as you want. Julian scowled. Is that what Dream of the Red Chamber taught you? I learned a few other things too. Lucas grinned. But you probably don't want to hear those. Julian glared at the speaker in his hand. Don't play it, he warned. Then say yes, Lucas said. I said yes. Lucas froze. You what? Julian rolled his eyes and turned away. Louder this time, clear and firm. I said yes. Even after the final scan confirmed the baby's right arm was normal, Lucas Shaw still looked like he couldn't believe it. You really said yes? Asked, pulling out his phone. Wait, I need to record this. What if you back out? Julian Grant replied without emotion. I'm not leaving that kind of prenatal influence on our kid. Just 2 days ago, he'd had a nightmare. In it, every other newborn cried, like normal. But his baby came out singing the legend of the white snake theme. Those 4 thunderous off-chen notes nearly sent him straight to the grave. He couldn't sleep the entire night. He told Lucas, as long as you stop playing that damn speaker, I'll go through with the performance. Having secured his promise, Lucas immediately texted Director Monroe. She must have been watching her grandson at the time, she responded. With a cheerful voice message, a baby wailing in the background, Lucas suddenly asked with genuine concern, what if our baby cries that? Much in the future? Crying's fine, Julian said coldly. Just don't sing. Let's split the lines, Lucas said, flipping through the lyrics. I listened to the original. It's partly Shao Qing and partly The Boatman. Which one do you want? Whichever has fewer lines. Then Shao Qing it is. Lucas passed him the phone. 4 lines total. At your memorization speed, that's 10 seconds. Max, Julian nodded, scanned through the lyrics and handed the phone back. When's the performance? Tomorrow. What? You're not worried I might not agree until the very last day? Julian gave him a look of disbelief. Lucas just smiled calmly. I already promised, Director Monroe. The persistent suitor always wins. I knew you'd cave. Julian nearly choked at the phrase, persistent suitor. Then another word caught his attention. You made a promise? For the overseas exchange trip? He'd never fully understood why Lucas was so eager about this whole thing. Yes, the opportunity to study abroad was rare. But even if they declined to perform, Director Monroe would still likely take them. She wasn't the type to hold grudges. In fact, just by mentioning it to them, Monroe had already made her intentions clear. Otherwise, she'd never have used the trip as a bargaining chip. Julian knew she'd take them regardless, performance or not. Lucas was usually sharp about interpersonal dynamics. No way he'd misread that. Lucas replied, Nope. I asked her for something else. Julian looked up. She promised me that if I could get you to perform with me, we'd get 3 extra free days during the trip. completely unstructured. I want to visit Dr. Ken, talk through the surgical details. Julian's expression shifted since they decided to wait for Dr. Ken's paper and have Lucas perform. The surgery, Julian hadn't thought much about it. The date was still far off. Plus, Ken had been less than warm. Julian didn't feel like dealing with him until the paper published. He hadn't expected Lucas to be thinking that far ahead. Lucas shrugged like it was nothing. I just want to be prepared. Julian looked at him and, despite himself, felt moved. He knew Lucas was taking a risk. The surgery wasn't just technically difficult. It was high stakes. If it went well, they'd be celebrated. If it didn't, Lucas's years of hard-earned reputation could take a serious hit. And if both he and the baby died, Lucas might not be devastated, but they had known each other for years. As the lead surgeon, Lucas would carry that forever. He'd remember it in the quiet hours. Haunted, Julian suddenly said, "Let's take a picture." "A picture?" Julian nodded. He pulled a DSLR and tripod from the cabinet and began assembling them. "You know how to use that?" Lucas asked, surprised. "I know a lot of things." Before college, Julian had been good at everything: music, chess, calligraphy, painting, even photography. He'd won awards for it. That's why his parents had splurged on the camera when he became top scorer. In the national science exam, they thought college would be easier, that he'd finally have time for hobbies. They had no idea college would be even harder than high school. The camera had sat unused ever since. Once he finished setting up, Julian carried the tripod into the study. By the window was a marble windowsill, padded with gray-white cushions, and framed by sheer white curtains. When closed, they looked like an elegant ink painting. "Sit there," he told Lucas. "Hold that pillow." Once Lucas sat, Julian adjusted his posture, changed the lighting settings, and chose the angle he liked best. "You're pretty into this," Lucas said, amused. "We got ourselves a future pro photographer?" Julian replied without looking up. "Who's we?" He found the old rhythm quickly. Back in high school, he'd loved photography. Even with no good gear, he'd practiced endlessly. After he finally got decent equipment, life had gotten too busy to use it. He fixed the camera on the tripod, adjusted the height, and set a timer. Then he walked over, sat beside Lucas, and casually threw an arm over his shoulder, resting his head slightly against him. The tip of Julian's hair brushed Lucas's cheek. Lucas froze. Julian, accustomed to photographing people, didn't shy away from physical closeness if it helped the shot. To make the picture look more natural and well-composed, he leaned in. Click. The shutter went off before Lucas could regain focus. Julian withdrew his arm and picked up the camera to check the shot. In the photo, under soft light, the two sat side by side. Both wore plain T-shirts and held matching pillows in different colors. Julian leaned casually against Lucas, face calm and relaxed. Together, they looked less like adults and more like spirited college boys. The composition, framed by the curtain and window, was serene and balanced. Julian nodded in satisfaction until he noticed Lucas hadn't looked at the camera. He zoomed in. Lucas was looking at the top of his head, and maybe Julian was imagining things, but there was something tender in that gaze. A voice broke the silence. "You've been staring for a while." Lucas stood behind him, and the warmth of his breath brushed Julian's neck. Julian panicked for no reason and quickly set the camera down. "Nothing." Lucas, more nervous than Julian, feared being teased for zoning out. He quickly retreated. Once he was gone, Julian opened the photo again and stared at it several more times. Maybe it was his own self-denial at work, but the more he looked, the less tender Lucas's gaze seemed. He exhaled, saved the photo to his phone, made a few color corrections, and sent it to Lucas. Lucas came back holding a glass of warm honey milk and handed it to Julian. When he heard the message chime, he checked his phone. "You sent me something?" He tapped open the photo and stared. "Julian, this is amazing. You captured the mood perfectly." When Julian had first suggested taking a photo, Lucas thought it would just be a cheesy peace sign selfie. But Julian had been serious. Lucas hadn't expected much. He hadn't seen Julian take photos in years. But the results stunned him. He wasn't a photography expert, but even he could feel the atmosphere captured in that image. Two men seated in warm light, eyes calm, bodies close. They weren't stiff or awkward, just two guys who'd played basketball and now rested side by side, caught in a quiet, unguarded moment. Lucas had accidentally looked at Julian instead of the camera, but that didn't ruin the shot. If anything, it gave the image a story. He stared at the photo, smiling. Then he set it as the background for their chat thread. When he looked up, Julian was watching him. "What?" Lucas asked. "Why are you staring at me like that?" "The photo's yours now," Julian said after a pause. "If I die, and you think of me, use it as a keepsake. Old folks might consider talk of death taboo, but for young doctors, especially surgeons, the word wasn't hard to say." Still, Julian found it difficult this time. Was he afraid to die? A little. Aside from Dr. Ken's one documented case, all other patients with his condition had poor outcomes. It wasn't about skill. Everybody was different. Even the best surgeon couldn't guarantee success. Doctors do their best. The rest is luck. And Julian had no choice but to face it. He tried to lighten the mood. "The surgery's risky. If I die, don't blame Julian." Lucas suddenly hugged him tight, cutting him off. What the hell? Julian had never been touchy. His whole life, affection came in the form of a punch on the arm. This kind of close contact made his skin crawl. He tried to wriggle free, but Lucas held on tighter. So Julian gave up. To his surprise, Lucas whispered by his ear, "If you die, I'm quitting." Clinical work? Seriously, Lucas? That fragile? Any surgeon had seen death. It was part of the job. Julian had lost count of how many he'd watched slip away. Lucas didn't answer right away. Eventually, he let go. Julian assumed he'd dropped the topic, until Lucas walked out with the empty glass and turned back with a small smile. "I am that fragile," he said. "So what?" Julian scowled. "You 3 years old?" Lucas didn't respond. "Forget all that. Just focus on memorizing the lyrics. Don't mess up tomorrow." Then he left the room. Julian looked at his retreating back and shook his head. Then he packed up the camera gear. He opened the cabinet to put it away, but paused. After a moment of thought, he set the camera on the side table instead. If there's time in the future, maybe they should take more pictures. As autumn deepened in a city, the Mid-Autumn Festival finally arrived, along with the full moon. The entrance of Jiwa Hospital felt like a barrier separating the outside world. Holiday cheer never made it inside. Patients came in droves, and the medical staff moved through the halls with unrelenting urgency. Julian Grant had just exited the OR when he ran into Lucas Shaw, who was changing in the locker room. "Hurry, hurry," Lucas said, checking his phone and glancing at the time. "I've got Li Sheng waiting for us at the auditorium," he said the acts before. "Us are running short. We're up sooner than scheduled." Julian frowned. "How's that possible?" "I timed it so I'd still have an hour before the show. You think everyone takes this as seriously as you?" "They were told to. Perform for 5 minutes. Most just show up, wing it, and bolt." The admin office had set a minimum time per performance, but clearly, none of the overworked hospital staff cared. "I'm changing," Julian said, grabbing his outfit from his locker. "Just change here." "No one's around," Lucas suggested. Even if someone walked in, the OR locker rooms were separated by gender. Julian paused mid-motion. "So you're not someone?" Lucas quickly turned his back, obedient. But as he heard the quiet rustle of Julian changing behind him, An odd tension bloomed in his chest. Light, itchy, unsettling. He hadn't planned on overthinking it, but being asked to turn around had sparked something, a flicker of awareness that hovered out of reach. Fortunately, Julian moved fast before Lucas could spiral into strange emotions. Julian patted his shoulder. "Let's go." They rushed out of the locker room toward the auditorium. Their coats caught the wind as they walked briskly. Julian almost broke into a run, but Lucas stopped him with an arm. Julian blinked, then remembered. Running wasn't exactly ideal right now. His early pregnancy symptoms had nearly faded. With vitamins, supplements, and good rest, he was enjoying what was probably the most comfortable phase of his pregnancy. Still, in moments like this, he sometimes forgot about the baby altogether. Lucas didn't. Even without experiencing it firsthand, he always seemed to remember. When they reached backstage, Li Sheng waved them over like a drowning man spotting a rescue boat. "Dr. Shaw, Dr. Grant, you made it." He was practically breathless. "You're up next. Director Monroe was just here looking for you. When I told her you hadn't arrived, she said if you two didn't show up in time, I'd have to go on instead. I have no clue how to perform this thing." Julian and Lucas exchanged glances, then looked back at Li Sheng and said in perfect unison, "Sorry we got here early." Before Li Sheng could vent his betrayal, the host finished announcing the previous act and came rushing backstage. "You're up. What are you waiting for?" Julian was still adjusting his sleeves when someone shoved a microphone into his hands. The opening chords of The Legend of the White Snake theme song started playing. Way too fast, way too loud. The curtain lifted, the lights hit the stage. Julian squinted under the glare, heart pounding. The last time he was on stage, he was 5 years old, wearing a red vest and face paint, doing cartwheels at a kindergarten recital. He hadn't even studied dance. His teacher just said he was good looking and made him try. Julian, gifted even as a child, learned to flip in 2 days and got dragged on stage. It had left almost no impression on him, but his parents never let it go. They told the story to every friend and relative they met. They even saved the video and showed it off at family gatherings. When he was 15, a cousin told him the video had become family lore. His awkward teen self had been mortified. He'd lost sleep for a night. And when his 6-year-old cousin asked him to dress up as Neja in that same vest, he'd seriously contemplated death. Since then, Julian avoided the stage like the plague, even after impulsively agreeing to perform with Lucas. He hadn't slept well that night. This was his first time participating in Jihua's mid to autumn gala. With everything moving so fast, he hadn't even had time to mentally prepare. His PTSD kicked in the moment the spotlight hit him. Instinctively, he wanted to step back, but it was too late. The lights locked on. There was nowhere to run. He froze for a split second, then turned to look for Lucas. Before his gaze could find him, a hand slipped around his waist. Warm, steady, just the right amount of pressure. The applause surged. Lucas guided him forward, stepping with calm certainty to center stage. As they reached the middle, Lucas raised the mic and sang the first line. "Beautiful Westlake and March skies." He sang while gazing at Julian, his eyes full of encouragement. When he finished the series of dramatic "ah" notes, Julian felt his heart settle. Spring rain like wine, willows like mist. Lucas's voice wasn't as bold as the original singer. It was deeper, lazier, smoother, and this time, unlike his chaotic rehearsals at home, he wasn't goofing off. He was serious, and Julian realized Lucas could really sing. He took a deep breath and brought the mic to his lips. "Fate brings us together across 1,000 miles." Lucas's lips curved into a smile. Without warning, he took Julian's hand. Without it, even hand in hand, we can't hold tight. Julian flinched, but before he could pull away, Lucas was already cueing him with a glance. 10 years to earn a boat ride together. Lucas followed, 100 to share a pillow through the night. Julian, voice quieter, continued. If fate shines over 1,000 years. Lucas smiled as he sang, a lifetime of love right before our eyes. If fate shines over 1,000 years. Lucas's gaze sparkled under the lights. A lifetime of love right before our eyes. His peach blossom eyes shimmered, soft and glowing. That look, warm and tender, landed lightly on Julian's face, setting his chest aflame. Peach blossom eyes had a way of fooling people, making them believe in love. If the original singer had the voice of a rough-and-tumble boatman, Lucas was a gentle Shushian, refined, elegant, and full of soft promises. Under misty bridges and moonlit towers, whispering vows of eternal love, Julian couldn't recall the exact plot of the show anymore. The theme song had long since become a grandma song, hummed more for fun than sentiment. But tonight, something about it clung to him. It didn't even say love, but it felt like love, like spring water, sweet and clear. It seeped into his bones. Lucas stood in a plain gray-white shirt, the soft sash at his wrist swaying gently. As he sang with a light smile, he looked like someone making a vow, not to the audience, but to Julian. La la la, la la la. Lucas gently swung their joined hands in time with the music. Then, during a quiet moment, he lowered the mic and whispered, "Look at the audience." Julian snapped out of his daze and turned his head. He hadn't looked at the audience once since stepping on stage. Somehow, he'd completely forgotten they were even there. But the auditorium was half full, more than in previous years. He could hear people humming along softly. Julian's mind felt foggy. He didn't know if it was stage fright or something else. Two doctors who were once known for being at odds, now standing hand in hand under soft lights, gently swaying to an old melody. In the front row, Director Sao nodded in satisfaction. I'd heard those two didn't get along, but they look pretty close to me. Director Monroe smiled. Young people. There's no such thing as an unfixable feud. Director Sao nudged his daughter. Xuan, those are the OBGYN, department's two youngest deputy chiefs. Graduated from a medical university. You should meet them sometime. Learn a thing or two. Monroe chimed in. They're not just OBGYN's best. Tell me, in the past 10 years, has our school produced anyone more impressive? Exactly, Director Ko said. They're legends. Everyone at Jihua knows them. You should really take the chance to learn from them. Clearly, the two directors had rehearsed this. So, Director Sao added, interested in meeting them? If you are, I'll pull some strings and set up a dinner, good to broaden your circle, and maybe stop running around all the time. You're not getting any younger. His daughter, Cao Xuan, had always been independent. Director Sao wanted her to study medicine. She insisted on sociology. She refused. Every career offer he tried to set up, and after graduation she'd bolted abroad for grad school. Now that she was finally back, he just wanted her to settle down, get married, and give him a grandchild, like Monroe had. But Cao Xuan had other ideas. She was a vocal advocate for equality and singlehood, with no intention of marrying or having kids, not even dating. She laughed softly. Dad, stop using networking as an excuse. You're just trying to set me up. She looked at the two men on stage, talented, good-looking, instantly captivating. Simple shirts, natural hair, no styling. Still, they lit up the stage. Even someone like her, so firm in her resolve, felt a flutter in her heart. Yes, her dad was right. These were prime matchmaking candidates. If he could, he'd swap bloodlines and call them his sons. But that was also why she didn't want to date doctors. When she was little, her dad used work as an excuse to ignore her, and her mom. Meanwhile, Director Monroe, equally busy, still made time for her child. That's when she realized family versus career isn't about the job. It's about responsibility. Her father had taught her through absence that she wanted something different. Director Sao, not discouraged, said, Then is there anyone you like? Cao Xuan was about to say no, when her childhood friend Yang Rui tugged her sleeve. What? Cao Xuan turned. Yang Rui leaned in and whispered, "The doctor on the left. I want to meet him." Cao Xuan never planned to get married herself, but she always hoped to see her friends happy, especially Yang Rui. Yang Rui had once been in a long-term relationship, nearly engaged. Cao Xuan had even agreed to be her bridesmaid, but the guy turned out to be a jerk. Watching her childhood friend finally crawl out of heartbreak and try to meet new people, Cao Xuan naturally wanted to help. She pointed at the doctor on the left side of the stage and asked her, "Father, what's his name?" Director Cao exchanged a pleased glance with Director Monroe. "Julian Grant," he replied. "He's not very talkative, but solid and genuine. A good kid." Even after leaving the stage, Julian's mind was still buzzing. Li Sheng ran up to them and, catching sight of their still linked hands, joked, all right, you're off stage now. No need to keep holding hands." Julian jolted back to awareness and quickly pulled his hand away from Lucas's. He hadn't even noticed they were still holding hands. Now he realized his palm was slightly damp with sweat. Lucas didn't comment. He took the water Li Sheng handed him and drank 2 sips. "Have you studied singing?" Julian suddenly asked. "If you want to say I did great, just say it," Lucas smirked. "No need to be coy." He offered the bottle to Julian, who hesitated and didn't take it. Lucas casually withdrew his hand and told Li Sheng to get Julian a fresh one. "I've got a lot of hidden talents," Lucas continued. "I won first place in our high school's top 10 singers contest every year." Julian took the sealed bottle from Li Sheng, opened it, and drank 2 sips. "Didn't see you compete in college, because someone didn't give me time," Lucas said. "With your study pace, if I'd signed up for the singing competition, I might as well have handed you first place in academics." Julian scoffed. Lucas laughed. "Good thing we didn't go to the same high school. Would have been exhausting." He set his water down and asked, "Back to the inpatient ward, shall we?" Julian nodded and was just about to go with him when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Director Cao. He'd taken a few of Cao's classes back in med school. They hadn't really stayed in touch until Julian was promoted to deputy chief and added him on WeChat, but Director Cao had never messaged him before. "Director Cao, Julian, do you have a moment? I'd like to treat you to dinner." Julian stared at the message in surprise. Almost immediately, a second message followed. "Don't worry. It's just my daughter and her friend. No work talk, just young people socializing. I won't be attending." Lucas noticed the look on Julian's face. "What's up?" Julian handed him the phone. Lucas read both messages word for word, then looked up at Julian. With everything that had just happened on stage, plus the perfect timing of this message, he instantly understood what was going on, but he didn't say it out loud. Julian quickly started typing a polite refusal. Lucas reached out to stop him. "It's the director. You should show some respect. At least go meet his daughter." Julian asked coldly, "Is she sick?" Lucas shook his head. "Then why would I meet her?" Julian stared at him. "I only treat the sick." Lucas sighed. "It's clearly a setup." Julian lifted his gaze sharply. "Director Monroe's our teacher. You've brushed her off more than once. She lets it slide because of the student-mentor bond. But you can't afford to offend the hospital director," Lucas said. "Don't be stubborn." Julian's tone turned icy. "You want me to go on a blind date?" "That's not what I meant," Lucas said quickly. "Don't twist my words." Julian didn't respond. He grabbed his coat and walked out, leaving behind only his crisp, retreating back. The autumn wind rushed in as he pulled the curtain open, making Li Sheng, who had been silently watching, shiver. Li Sheng had always known they didn't get along. When he first heard they'd be performing together, he braced himself for disaster. But the show had gone surprisingly well, and they'd even seemed friendly. Afterward, relieved, Li Sheng had let his guard down. Then, in just 2 minutes, everything blew up again. He could tell. Julian was angry, and Lucas stood there like a statue, motionless. Dr. Shaw. Li Sheng hesitated. Lucas seemed to snap out of it. He looked at Li Sheng, shook his head, lightly, and silently put on his coat and walked out. Just like that, the Cold War resumed. Cao Xuan quickly added Julian on WeChat and set a time and place. On the day of the dinner, Director Monroe even called Julian into her office to sing Cao's praises. Afraid Julian still didn't get the message, she added bluntly, "You've got a bright future, but life is unpredictable. If your father-in-law's the hospital, Director, that road's even easier." Normally, Julian would have fired back. His future was his own, not something to be bought. But maybe Lucas's words were still echoing in his mind. Whatever the reason, he held his tongue. Right before the workday ended, Lucas messaged him, "What time are you heading out?" Ever since Julian's abdominal pain that night, Lucas always asked when they'd both be working late. If their shifts lined up, he'd coordinate. Leaving with Julian, even though they drove separately, they always walked out together. Before the unexpected pregnancy, they'd also often left together, but it was competitive back then, each one trying to stay later than the other. Because of that, no one in the department had noticed anything had changed. Julian glanced at his phone and replied, "No need to wait for me." Lucas sat at the far end of the office. The moment he saw the message, he stood up and walked over to Julian's desk. "You're going to that dinner?" Lucas didn't say the word aloud, but Julian knew exactly what he meant. Julian stood, gave him a cold look and said, "Isn't that what you wanted?" Without waiting for a response, he turned and left. Lucas's reaction had truly pissed him off. He didn't even know why. He just didn't want to talk to Lucas right now. At the restaurant, Julian saw Cao Xuan chatting with a friend. They'd chosen a table by the window, overlooking the bustling street. Director Cao had already sent Julian a photo of her. Though he had a hard time with faces, the girl next to Cao Xuan instantly recognized him and waved him over. "Good evening," Julian greeted as he sat across from them. "And I'm Julian Grant." "Cao Xuan," she said with a smile. Then she gestured to her friend. "This is Yang Rui." She handed him the menu. "Yang Rui and I already ordered. Feel free to add anything else." As she spoke, the dishes began arriving. It was clearly enough food. Julian hadn't planned to add more until his eyes caught something familiar on the menu. "Tiger skin peppers. Let's add this," he said after a pause, pointing it out. "Tiger skin peppers?" Yang Rui repeated, confused. "Never heard of that. Is it good?" Julian gave a quiet, "You can try it." Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flash of yellow outside the window. He instinctively turned, but it was gone. Just a blur that vanished into traffic. "What are you looking at, Dr. Grant?" Yang Rui asked curiously. "That car," Julian replied. "It looked like one my coworker drives." "Coworker? Sounds more like a friend," Yang Rui teased. "Do you remember what kind of car I drive?" she asked Cao Xuan. Cao Xuan shook her head. "You've got too many. I lost track." Yang Rui shrugged and smiled at Julian. "See? Even Shuang Xuan doesn't remember my car." Julian turned to Cao Xuan and, recalling the careful speech he'd rehearsed, began, "Miss Cao, thank you for inviting me." "Wait a sec," she interrupted. "I know what you're thinking," my dad asked. "You here to set me up, right?" She was brutally honest. "I knew you weren't into me the moment I saw you. Don't worry, no need to hit me with the 'you're a great person, but' speech. Let me speak." First, Julian, caught off guard, was still thinking of how to let her down gently, without offending her or the director. Now he was stunned, speechless. "Honestly," she continued, "I didn't want this either, so I'll handle my dad. I'll just say we didn't vibe." Julian breathed a sigh of relief. But Dr. Grant, she added, this dinner wasn't just to satisfy my dad. My main reason was that Yang Rui wanted to thank you in person. Thank me? Julian frowned. He didn't recall treating her as a patient. Do you remember Bin Huang? Yang Rui asked. I'm his ex. You sent me that voice recording? Ah, that. Julian remembered now. He also recalled how the woman had blocked him right after he sent it. That day, after I got the recording, Bin showed up. He only told me you were his classmate and that I should talk to you about the surgery. He's petty. I was afraid he'd see my phone and realize you recorded him, so I deleted everything related to you. Too clean, actually. I couldn't even find your contact again later. She smiled awkwardly. Then at the Mid-Autumn Festival show, I saw you on stage and recognized you from your profile picture. Julian's WeChat avatar was just a headshot for easy contact with patients and colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Grant, Yang Rui said sincerely. Don't worry, I told Bin I never got your friend request. When I broke up with him, I didn't mention the recording. He shouldn't suspect you. Julian looked at her, surprised. Cao Xuan chimed in. I want to thank you too. I used to think all men were trash, but it turns out there are still good ones. When Yang Rui said she wanted to meet the doctor who'd sent her the recording, the one who helped her escape a terrible relationship, Cao Xuan had assumed it was a potential romantic interest. She hadn't expected it to be Julian, young and accomplished. And you're okay now? Julian asked. I'm fine, Yang Rui replied. I wasn't pregnant. She glanced at Cao Xuan and smiled. Bin told me we'd get married if I got pregnant. That felt off, so I told Xuan, and she helped me figure it out. Turns out he's exactly who we feared he was. Better to cut losses early. Cao Xuan snorted. He had the nerve to say Rui wasn't rich enough. Jokes on him. Her family could buy his whole damn company if they wanted. Good thing I told her not to reveal her background too soon. Still, Yang Rui said, you really surprised me, Dr. Grant. You look so serious and well-mannered. But that recording? Brutal. So satisfying. Too bad he hung up. I didn't get to hear the rest. She chuckled. I used to think all med students were boring nerds. After all those years of school, master's, PhD, I figured you'd be dull. But you were sharp enough to record that call. Julian shook his head. I didn't record it. Lucas did, my colleague from the performance. He'd even processed the audio to disguise Lucas's voice before sending it to her. He explained the basic situation, omitting that he and Lucas lived together. Yang Rui nodded. I see. I should have invited him too. He deserves thanks. As they spoke, the tiger skin peppers arrived. Julian picked up a piece and took a bite. Since Cao Xuan had made her intentions clear, he was finally able to relax. Learning that Yang Rui wasn't pregnant and didn't need surgery lifted a weight from his shoulders. When they mentioned Lucas, Julian didn't notice the small smile that touched his lips. I'll pass the message along, he said. He figured Lucas would be happy to know this twisty little story had a good ending. Dr. Grant, Yang Rui said, watching him eat. You look so cold all the time, but a plate of tiger skin peppers can really brighten your mood. She tried one herself. After a long chew, she frowned. Honestly? Not that good. Julian paused, then lifted his head. They're not as good, he said, as the ones my coworker makes. Outside the glass window, the yellow car idled quietly on the roadside. Inside sat a colleague of Julian Grant, though not one he was expecting. Watching the bustling restaurant from afar, from his angle, he could just see Julian's profile, illuminated under the warm lights. But he couldn't see the person across from him. Was Miss Cow beautiful? She must be, Lucas Shaw thought. Otherwise, why would Julian smile at her like that? He had never smiled at him like that. Lucas took a deep breath and rubbed his brow. The way he was brooding Like a jealous lover, felt pathetic, even to himself. He didn't know what had driven him to follow Julian's car all the way here, parked in this overpriced lot, $30 an hour, just to watch him on a date. Before he arrived, he'd received an email from a magazine editor. After Lucas had revised his student's paper beyond recognition, the initial review had finally passed. The reviewers left a few minor comments, urging him to submit revisions quickly. So technically, right now, he should have been locked in his study helping with revisions, not stalking Julian on a dinner date. But his foot was on the brake, not the gas. He just couldn't leave. Maybe it was the chill of the deepening night, or the exhaustion from another long day. His brain, deprived of rest, was now rebelling with a torrent of dark thoughts. For instance, what if the baby never existed? Julian could be with Miss Sao. They'd fall in love, get married, become the hospital director's golden son-in-law. A perfect family, sweet romance, career success. With Julian's talent, he could easily retire by 40. If he kept pushing, maybe he'd become the youngest director Jihua had ever seen. Or if he wanted to slow down, he could enjoy a life of ease. Finally indulge in the future medicine had postponed. That thought made Lucas recall something old, something about filling out college applications. After he got his high school results, recruiters from all the top universities contacted him. And truthfully, no matter how prestigious the school, when they were scrambling to snatch up a valedictorian like him, they weren't so different from sales clerks at a clothing store. First, they'd brag endlessly about their programs. Then, like a store offering deals, they'd list all the scholarships available. One common pitch was, "This one's popular. Just before you called, someone else picked the same one." In academic terms, it became "just between us, another valedictorian from B City is planning to choose our school too." The recruiter gave Lucas a knowing look. The implication was clear. Let Julian Grant's choice influence yours. Lucas, who had been half listening the whole time, paused. He chose your school. "Yes," the rep said proudly. "When it comes to medicine, what school could possibly compare to ours?" At that point, it had been a month or two since the last time Lucas saw Julian. He'd figured Julian would eat his words once the scores came out. But instead, they had tied. In decades of college entrance exams, B-City had never seen valedictorians, but that year, fate intervened. At 18, Lucas had been proud and reckless. Driven by impulse, he picked the same top choice, a medical university's 8-year clinical program, just to see Julian again. He wanted to tell him tying with you in the exam was a fluke. "I'll prove to you there can only be one number one between us." But Julian beat him to it, and the boy from number 6 high turned out to be a far tougher rival than he'd imagined. Because of that one stubborn decision, college, a supposed break after high school, turned into hell mode. He used Julian as an excuse to turn down dates. Maybe it was partly spite, partly self-punishment. He knew Julian was struggling too, but Lucas bore a deeper weight. He had chosen to go to the same school, to study the same major, just to chase someone he couldn't let go. He had well and truly shot himself in the foot. When it came time to choose specialties, Lucas once again found out where Julian was headed. Unlike the first time, when a recruiter had told him, this time, he'd looked it up himself. He was exhausted, done fighting, but he couldn't bring himself to admit defeat, so he picked the one specialty he was sure Julian would never choose. He thought that would be his clean break, but fate had other plans. They collided again. The day Lucas was promoted to deputy chief ahead of his peers, he felt a strange sense of irony. Like the moment he met Julian at 18, that boy in the school uniform had stepped into his life and never left. Julian had become half of Lucas's entire life. That night, while covering Julian's overnight shift, Lucas found himself revisiting the past. Julian was asleep on the couch. Lucas asked him quietly, "Do you regret it?" He wasn't asking Julian. He was asking himself, did he regret choosing the same school as Julian? He didn't. Without Julian's push, Lucas had confidence he would still succeed, become a great doctor, maybe even top his field. But it was because of Julian that they became the legends of Jihua Hospital, standing side by side. Lucas had once believed Julian would keep pace with him forever. He finally accepted that, until one day, Julian slowed, just a little, and started chasing after Zhang Lan. Lucas didn't know why it upset him so much, but he found himself back in competition mode. Zhang Lan was the first girl Lucas had ever seriously pursued. Looking back, even then, it hadn't been about her. It was about Julian. Even the night he got rejected and called Julian out for drinks, it wasn't just about heartbreak. Deep down, he had wanted to ask, are you ready to get married? Settle down? Are you done competing with me? But the fake wine stole his chance. He never got to ask. Lucas realized how impossible he was. When Julian competed with him, it was exhausting. But when Julian didn't, the silence hurt more. He cared too much. He used to think that meant rivalry. Now he wasn't so sure. Maybe it wasn't just rivalry anymore, but what was it? Even he couldn't say. Neuroscience remains one of the most complex fields because so much of it is still a mystery. Even doctors can't untangle their own thoughts. Lucas didn't know what neurotransmitter was flooding his synapses right now, but he wished it would stop. It made him ache in ways he couldn't explain. When Julian opened the door and turned on the lights, he was surprised to find Lucas sitting on the couch in the dark. "You're home?" he asked. "Why didn't you turn the lights on?" They were technically still giving each other the cold shoulder. Julian hadn't planned to speak to Lucas so soon, but he wanted to tell him about Yang Rui, so he let it go. Just tired," Lucas murmured, pressing his temples. His voice was hoarse, dozed off a bit. "If you're tired, go to bed." Julian walked over, setting down his briefcase. That's when he caught the smell. Wine. There was a half-filled glass and a bottle of red wine on the table. Julian didn't keep alcohol at home. Lucas must have bought it. He frowned and quietly washed the glass, put the wine away in the cabinet. "I have something to tell you," he said, sitting down beside him. Just as he was about to speak, his phone rang. Lucas tilted his chin. "Go ahead." Julian glanced at the screen. It was Tang Ke. Maybe something was wrong with the pregnancy? "Uneasy," he answered. But Tang's voice was elated. "Good news. Dr. Ken's paper just got published." His voice was so excited it practically exploded. "The surgery video is up on the journal's website, plus all the prenatal test data and procedure notes. Talk to Lucas and set a date for surgery. I'll help you book the OR." On this end, just a few weeks ago, the article had been stuck in limbo. Tang had even warned Julian to prepare for the worst. Now, out of nowhere, everything had come through early. It was a miracle. This meant Julian still had time for the abortion surgery. He wouldn't have to carry the baby to term. Tang was still giddy on the line, his voice booming through the speaker. Julian hadn't turned the volume down fast enough. He wasn't sure if Lucas had heard, but suddenly, he didn't dare meet Lucas's eyes. Tang continued, "Check it out online. People are buzzing about it. For this kind of operation, the sooner the better. You've already delayed too long. Hurry up and talk to Lucas. Get ready." Julian could practically picture Tang waving his arms around on the other end. Tang was sincerely thinking of him. Julian should have felt grateful. But instead, for reasons he couldn't explain, Tang's enthusiasm grated on him. "I got it," he said. "I'll look now." He hung up and opened his phone, only to be met with another notification. His visa had been approved. After his third rejection, Julian had followed Tang's advice and submitted a formal appeal, attaching all his medical records. He'd stopped hoping for a response, but here it was, approval. Now, not only could Lucas do the surgery, Julian could also fly to the US. and ask Dr. Ken himself if he could afford it. "What's wrong?" Lucas asked. Julian stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he slowly turned to look at Lucas and said, "Dr. Ken's article was published." He paused. "And my visa's been approved." Lucas Shaw felt as if something in his brain had snapped. For a long time, he couldn't hear anything, like the world had gone mute, and his thoughts floated in a daze. "That's good news," he muttered, unsure why he was even speaking or what he was trying to say. "Congrats." Julian Grant looked at him with a complicated expression. "Why the face?" Lucas said. "You should be happy." He straightened up, opened his laptop, and began searching for updates. Sure enough, Dr. Ken's article had exploded across the field, stirring up heated discussions. Lucas clicked on the journal's homepage, but the page refused to load. "Internet's crap," he muttered. "Can't even open the site." Julian said, "I already downloaded it." "Of course. Your Wi-Fi only loves you," Lucas joked, forcing a smile. "Won't let the guest connect." Julian frowned slightly. "What are you talking about?" Maybe it was the wine or the exhaustion, but Lucas no longer felt like masking his emotions. "Did I say something wrong?" "I'm just a guest here. You know it. Your Wi-Fi knows it. I guess I'm the only one who doesn't." "Stop acting drunk." Julian sent the files to Lucas via WeChat, then turned on the living room projector and streamed Dr. Ken's surgery video from his laptop. The surgery lasted over 4 hours, but the video was sharp and clear. The two men sat silently on opposite ends of the couch, watching it. Occasionally, they exchanged a few professional comments, just like when they were students shadowing Director Monroe. Dr. Ken was cold and arrogant, but undeniably skilled. His responses to intraoperative complications were swift and precise. The man was, without question, an elite surgeon. 4 hours felt long, but in that quiet night, they passed quickly. The video ended amid a chorus of jubilant congratulations, and the screen faded to black as the acknowledgments rolled. Julian reached for the remote and hit pause. The living room fell into silence. Neither of them spoke. Normally, they'd immediately start analyzing the surgery, breaking it down together. But tonight, something was off. Julian didn't say a word, and Lucas couldn't bring himself to. Outside, the moon hung cold in the sky. The first leaves of autumn had already begun to fall. After a long silence, Lucas spoke first. "I did some research. Because there are so few cases, there's no solid evidence that surgical abortion is safer than a cesarean for male patients. Even though you're planning a termination, given the risks involved, I recommend an open surgery instead of laparoscopic." He pointed to the screen. "Ken did an open procedure. It's the most complete recording we have. Plus, the male abdominal structure differs from female anatomy. An open surgery gives the lead surgeon better visual and tactile feedback. I'll rewatch the video a few more times and go through your case file. If you want me to do the surgery, I'll draft a preliminary plan by tomorrow night. Free up your evening so we can go over it. I'll also email Dr. Ken. Try to speak with him before the procedure. If you'd rather have it done abroad." "Lucas," Julian cut him off abruptly. "I don't want to talk about this right now." He didn't even know what he was feeling. He just kept thinking about the bags of baby clothes and toys still sitting in the study. They'd only just bought all those gifts for her. Now they were discussing how to kill her. "It's late," Julian said. "I'm taking a shower." He was exhausted. After work, he'd gone straight to a dinner then. Returned to this, a 4-hour session of intense surgical analysis. He hadn't moved from the couch the entire time. "Don't drag this out," Lucas said, rubbing his temples. "The sooner we deal with the baby, the sooner you can go chase Miss Cow." The alcohol blurred his judgment and his emotions ran high. His words slipped out, harsh and careless. What he wanted to say was, if he had known it was a matchmaking dinner, He wouldn't have helped Julian with the performance at all. Julian froze mid-step. He turned, shocked, his voice trembling slightly. With anger. "We've known each other for 10 years, Lucas," he said. "Is that really how little you think of me?" Julian. "Shut up." He stood abruptly, his blood boiling, and stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Lucas sat there, ran a hand over his face, full of regret. A few moments later, bam, the door burst open again, banging into the wall with a loud crack. Lucas turned to see Julian dragging a suitcase to the front door, already slipping on his shoes. "Where are you going?" Lucas shot up. "It's late. Whatever this is, we can talk tomorrow." Julian ignored him. "Get lost." He yanked open the door and stepped out. Lucas scrambled to follow. Dizzy from the alcohol, he tripped over Julian's shoe and stumbled. By the time he regained his balance, the elevator doors had already closed. He rushed down the stairs, ran through the parking garage. But Julian wasn't at his car. Lucas climbed back up and raced out the front gates. Julian had just climbed into a cab. All Lucas caught was the exhaust. Fumes, breathless, drenched in sweat. Lucas stood alone in the middle of the street. It was after midnight. This area wasn't great for hailing cabs. Julian must have ordered one in the elevator. If Lucas called one now, it'd be too late. Gasping, Lucas waved desperately at passing cars. A gray sedan pulled over. The driver, a kind-looking man, rolled down the window. "Everything okay, buddy? Can you give me a ride?" Lucas panted. "Help me catch that cab. I'll pay. Anything." The driver glanced at him, clearly a young guy who had rushed out from home in pajamas, and nodded. "Hop in." Once Lucas got in, the driver hit the gas and asked, "Chasing your wife?" "No. Girlfriend, then?" The driver teased. "Don't be shy, man. I've been there. My wife's got a temper too. Runs off in the middle of the night all the time." Lucas couldn't even muster a joke. His mind was spinning. He forced a tight smile and handed the driver $200. "Nah, I'm not a cabbie," the driver said, waving him off. "Just helping you out. It'll be fine, man. Couples fight. It's normal." This big-hearted stranger had just finished a night shift and was heading home, but decided to help a fellow soul in distress. Meanwhile, in the cab ahead, Julian spotted Lucas's car behind them and told the driver, "Lose that car. He's following me." Now, if Lucas's driver was a family drama type, Julian's cabbie was straight out of a Hong Kong gangster movie. The wiry little man narrowed his eyes and nodded solemnly. "Don't worry." Then floored it. The G-forces slammed Julian into the seat as the car surged forward, weaving through traffic, staying right at the legal speed limit, switching lanes like a madman, darting into alleys and whipping around corners. After several intense minutes, the cabbie finally asked, "By the way, where were you going again?" "Julian." Back at a quiet apartment entrance, Lucas's borrowed car came to a halt. The driver scratched his head, confused. "I think you're not catching that cab, my friend." Lucas stared at the empty road. "I heard people in a city say the cabs are intense. Didn't believe it until now," the driver muttered. "Did you catch which way he turned?" Lucas didn't answer. To be honest, he had lost sight of the cab long before this. There were too many taxis on the road. They all looked the same. "Can you guess where he might go?" the driver asked. "Maybe his parents' place? He doesn't have family in a city. Friends? Bestie?" Lucas rolled down the window. The cold autumn air hit his sweat-drenched skin, making him shiver. He thought for a second, then called Tang K. Inside his apartment, Tong had just seen Julian disappear into the shower. When he saw Lucas's name, he quickly silenced the phone and stepped out to the balcony. "Lucas? It's me," Lucas said. "Is Julian at your place?" Tang didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "You two are living together, aren't you?" Earlier that evening, Julian had shown up at Tang's door, silent and drained, hauling a suitcase. Now, with this phone call, Tang put the pieces together. Julian had always lived alone. Something major must have happened to make him show up with luggage, unless someone else had been living with him. Back when they met at the prenatal checkup, their interaction had already raised suspicions. Now it was all too clear. Julian's acting like he wants to suffer on purpose, Tang muttered. How'd you even trick him into letting you move in? Forget that, Lucas said. Can I come over? I want to talk to him. Not now. He's in the shower. I'll ask him and get back to you. Lucas knew Julian well enough not to argue. He hung up and sighed. Can you take me back? He asked the driver. The driver glanced at him, slumped, exhausted, and said kindly, It's all right. Just say sorry. If he loves you, he'll forgive you. Lucas shook his head. We're not lovers. Honestly, he probably hates me, wants to be rid of me. Then you're pursuing him? No. Look, the driver said. If you're not a couple, you shouldn't be chasing people into their homes this late at night. That's creepy. We're just co-workers, Lucas said. Worked on a project together. He sighed. We never got along. He didn't want to work with me. But we were both forced into it. Now that pressure's gone, I think he wants to walk away. Maybe it was the late hour, or maybe this warm-hearted stranger had unlocked something. But Lucas suddenly found himself pouring out his story to a complete stranger. The driver listened intently, brows furrowed. Lucas trailed off, realizing how much he'd said. I'm just... Say no more, the driver said, nodding. I get it. You still want to work with him? Lucas didn't reply. He wants out. You want to stay, the driver said. So this fight, was it about that? Sort of. Then why is he mad? The driver asked. If he's the one who wants to leave and you said so, why is he angry? I was too blunt, Lucas said. I said the wrong thing. Can I ask you something? The driver said. Serious now. Did your coworker ever actually say he wanted to quit? Lucas paused, then slowly shook his head. But walking away is what's best for him. You're not him, the driver said. How do you know what's best for him? He was firm before. That was before, the driver said. My kid throws tantrums every 5 minutes. Weather changes. Why can't people change their minds? Take my advice, the driver said. Apologize first, then ask him what he wants. Don't guess. Misunderstandings come from guessing. Lucas nodded, but thought bitterly. It's not just a project. It's a baby. And Julian wasn't the kind of person who wanted to raise a child. He had ambition, talent, vision. A child would only weigh him down. Lucas knew he shouldn't be selfish, but he was tired of explaining. Back at Julian's building, Lucas quietly slipped 200 yuan under the seat before getting out. The driver didn't notice until Lucas was gone. He sighed, watching Lucas disappear into the dark. Young people, he muttered. Always so dramatic. After finishing his shower, Julian Grant stepped out of the bathroom and found Tang Ke leaning against the balcony rail with an accusatory look. Julian walked past him, tossed his clothes into the washing machine, and just as he hit the power button, Tang said in a low voice, Lucas called. Me. Julian's hand paused mid-motion. After a moment, he closed the lid, set the water level and wash cycle, and hit start. The hum of water began to fill the silence. He thinks I want to get rid of the baby so I can cozy up to the hospital. Director, Julian said, sitting down on the couch and sipping hot water. All these years I may have questioned his skills, but never his integrity. He lowered his gaze. And he thinks that's the kind of person I am. Tang Ke sat beside him and patted his shoulder. Maybe he didn't mean it. Like that. Are you defending him now? Julian asked. No, I just think it's strange. Tang hesitated. The Julian I know wouldn't get so worked up over one sentence from an old rival. Not enough to walk out in the middle of the night. He paused, then carefully asked, "Is that really all you're upset about? Or are you looking for a reason to be upset about something else?" "You're overthinking it," Julian cut him off. Tang fell silent. After a moment, Julian set his cup down. "I'm going to bed. Got surgery in the morning." The door shut softly behind him. Ripples trembled across the surface of the water in the cup, expanding gently before fading. Tang looked at his retreating figure with a complex expression. A harsh word between friends could be forgiven. An insult from a rival in the heat of the moment was expected. Tang didn't believe Julian and Lucas hadn't said worse to each other in the past. But there was one exception. If the words came from someone you cared about, then even a small hurt could cut deep. Tang didn't want to speculate. Maybe he was being too sensitive. Maybe Julian hadn't thought about it that way at all. Maybe Tang was just overthinking. He adjusted his mood and called Lucas back. The call connected almost instantly. "Can I come over?" Lucas asked. Tang stepped onto the balcony, drew the sliding door shut, and lowered his voice. "Do you know what you're going to say?" Lucas didn't answer. "Then there's no point coming," Tang said. "He's asleep. Pregnant people need rest. He's already on night shifts at the hospital. Let him get some proper sleep tonight." "All right." Lucas's voice sounded defeated. Tang sighed and brushed the curtain aside. "Lucas, I've never liked you. Probably because of your history with Julian. But tonight, I'm going to speak up for him." A year or two ago, a med student asked Julian about getting into a private hospital. Julian's strict with students, but if he can help, he does. Even though he was slammed at the time, he made time to have dinner with me and the kid, wanted the student to learn from me. During the meal, the student tried to flatter Julian. Said you weren't that skilled, that the only reason you were his equal was because you kissed. Up to the higher-ups, buttered up your mentors, probably even gave expensive gifts. Julian's face went cold. He scolded the kid right there, told him he was being divisive, manipulative. The poor guy was sweating buckets, clearly. Hadn't expected Julian to defend you, of all people. Know what Julian said about you? Tang continued. He said, "You're not like that." Said you got where you are on your own skill. Julian may not be a smooth talker, but he's honest. You're so jaded. You see everyone through your own warped lens. He may not like you, but even then, he's always separated personal bias from professional judgment. He's never questioned your character. Lucas was silent for a long time before saying quietly, "I wasn't questioning his character." He stared at the cold moon outside, lying on the floor mattress. Julian had added an extra blanket. The floor wasn't as hard anymore, but the bed beside him remained empty. He hadn't meant what he said. He'd spoken out of jealousy, out of fear. If he'd had more time to think, he would have kept his selfishness hidden, reasoned with Julian calmly, accepted whatever decision he made, even if it meant saying goodbye to the child. If he'd had just a little more time, maybe he could have accepted going back to what they were before. Distant colleagues, respectful rivals. 2. Fathers in name only, bound by obligation, not love. He knew letting go of the baby was the right choice. They were never supposed to be entangled like this. Abortion would be the better option for Julian. But it had all happened so suddenly. Lucas hadn't had time to suppress his desire to say the right thing. Instead of the selfish one, now Julian could drop the baby and him at any moment. If this had been a few months ago, when they first learned about the pregnancy, maybe that would have been a relief. But now, all Lucas felt was loss. He hated the idea of Julian walking away. Not just the baby, Julian. He wanted Julian to stay, just like the last 10 years, when no one else could come between them, when no one else mattered. He didn't understand where this possessiveness came from. Truthfully, Lucas never believed Julian was trying to cozy up to the hospital director. He had spoken in a jealous, panicked haze. That kind of ugly suspicion was just the easiest way to test the waters. Because what else could he ask? Do you want to get rid of me? He never thought Julian would be that angry. Tell him I was wrong, Lucas said at last. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have been drinking either. The first time he drank, he made a mess and got Julian pregnant. This time, he drank and said the worst thing possible, again hurting Julian. Tell him not to take it to heart, Lucas said, staring at the pink bunny on Julian's bed. Please? The next morning, Julian listened as Tang relayed Lucas's apology. Couldn't help rolling his eyes. Next time, just record it. No need for a dramatic retelling. I just thought it was rare, Tang said. It's Lucas we're talking about. I've known the guy for years and never heard him sound so humble. He looked almost regretful. Should have recorded it, played it for our whole med school class. It would have shocked everyone. Tang couldn't help asking, Julian, what did you do to him? Julian lifted his gaze, unsure how to answer. Even he hadn't expected such a sincere apology from Lucas. Luckily, Tang let it go as a passing comment and didn't press. Julian quietly sighed in relief. After washing up, Julian sat at the table out of habit, only to realize this wasn't his table. And there was no breakfast waiting, no soybean milk, no dumplings, no Lucas. Julian had always had a poor breakfast routine, skipping meals if he didn't feel hungry. It was only after Lucas moved in that he started eating breakfast every day. Strangely, it hadn't been long. Yet somehow, it had already become a habit. After a long pause, he turned to Tang and asked, What do you usually eat for breakfast? I grabbed something at the hospital cafeteria, Tang replied, oblivious. Honestly, our cafeteria is way better than a medical's. Julian. He picked up his bag and decided to return to his old life. Last night he'd been too emotional to drive, so he had taken a cab. Now, he hesitated between going home to get his car or just heading straight to the hospital. He chose the latter. He wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Tong's place was a little farther from Jiwa Hospital. When Julian arrived, most of his colleagues were already there. Some making coffee, some eating breakfast. The office was unusually lively this morning. Everyone was buzzing about Dr. Ken's article. Dr. Grant, Yu Sang greeted him. Did you read the paper yesterday? Julian glanced across the room at Lucas's desk. They sat at opposite corners. From his angle, all he could see was the back of Lucas's head. Lucas didn't turn around. I read it, Julian said, as he set down his bag. Then he noticed a steaming cup of soy milk and a box of soup dumplings sitting on his desk. He recognized the packaging immediately. They were from the breakfast shop downstairs from his building. Yu Sang continued chatting beside him. We've all been talking about it. Crazy stuff. Turns out men really can give birth. I mean, yeah, the previous cases all failed, but yesterday's paper actually succeeded. He added, Why haven't we ever encountered a case like that? Do you think it has to do with genetics? Julian gave him a blank look. It probably had nothing to do with genetics, because one of those rare cases was sitting right in front of him. He didn't reply. Instead, he asked, Did you eat? Not yet. Cafeteria food's terrible. Coffee's enough for me. Yu Sang was Julian's oldest student. He had inherited all of Julian's bad habits. Julian pushed the dumplings and soy milk across the desk to him. Eat. Whoa. Yu Sang beamed. You're being so nice today. What's the occasion, Dr. Grant? He took a big gulp of soy milk. Didn't expect you to bring me breakfast. Julian didn't get the chance to explain. Just then, the office door opened, and everyone turned to look. It was Director Monroe. Morning, Director. Everyone greeted her in unison. Monroe smiled. I heard you all talking about the article just now. Good. Keep learning. As one of the top hospitals in the country, Jiwa was always quick to share cutting-edge research with its departments. Before formal case reviews, colleagues would often chat informally about the latest findings, especially something as unprecedented as this. Interest ran high. Julian Grant, Lucas Shaw, Director Monroe called their names. Both answered in unison, "Here." Hearing Lucas's voice overlap with his own, Julian pressed his lips together. "What's up, Director?" Lucas asked. "Did you two read Ken's article and watch the surgery video?" "Yeah," Lucas replied. This time, Julian deliberately waited a beat before replying, so their voices wouldn't clash. "Yes, good." Director Monroe nodded, satisfied. "You two, prep a case report. Full department meeting tomorrow at 4 to study this case. You'll each give a presentation." With that, she turned and strode out. The office buzzed back to life. Zhonglan whispered with admiration, "Good thing it's you two. No one else could prep a report this fast." She added, "That article didn't drop until late last night, and you guys already watched a 4-hour surgery. No wonder they were the legends of Jihua. Just happened to catch it," Julian said. Lucas glanced at him but didn't mention that he'd actually watched it more than once. Wu Rui sipped his goji tea and smiled. "For them, this is a walk in the park." Yu Sang chimed in with his usual sarcasm. "Not sure if Dr. Shaw can pull it off, but I bet Grant already finished his report last night." Zhang Cheng, close with Lucas since school, frowned. "Doing it early doesn't mean doing it well. Every time we've had a new case, Lucas's analysis has been the best." "Oh yeah?" Yu Sang fired back. "I think Julian's are better." "Then your judgment's broken," Zhang shot back, ready for war. "Seriously, every single one?" As the two squared up, Julian calmly raised a hand and pulled Yu Sang back into his seat. At the same time, Lucas stood and grabbed Zhang by the collar, dragging him out of range. "You trying to fight?" Yu Sang barked. Seeing Lucas's intense stare, he grabbed his half-eaten dumplings to protect Julian. "I need to talk to you," Lucas said, looking straight at Julian. Julian gave him a cool glance, then pushed Yu Sang aside. The two of walked out of the office together. "Go get him, Grant." Yu Sang cheered behind them. "Have some class," Zhang groaned. "You're ruining Jihua's reputation." Then he turned to the hallway. "Lucas, if you lose to Julian, you're not a real man." Julian and Lucas. They shut the door behind them with a shared look of disbelief. Outside, Lucas asked, "Why didn't you eat breakfast?" "I did." Lucas gave him a look of pure skepticism. "If you weren't in the hospital, maybe I couldn't stop you. But now? You're coming with me to the lab for a blood sugar test. If you really ate, I won't say a word." "No." "You going or not?" "No. You've got stomach issues. Skipping breakfast is why you're always sick. Even if you're mad at me, don't take it out on yourself." He grabbed Julian's wrist. Julian immediately twisted his fingers back. His glasses reflected a sharp glint. "You think that's your business?" "Yes," Lucas said. "I care. Mind your own business." Julian now suspected the version of Lucas from last night, apologetic, humble, might have been an illusion, or at least wildly embellished in Tanki's retelling. He should have known Lucas would never stay humble for long, always had. To push back, argue, press buttons. "Focus on your presentation," Julian said coldly. "What I eat or do is none of your concern." The hallway clock ticked closer to 8. Med students waiting for grand rounds were already gathering outside the office. Julian shot Lucas one last glare, yanked his wrist free, and headed back inside. Yu Sang immediately grabbed him. "Who won?" Julian picked up his clipboard and pen without answering, striding off. Yu Sang blinked in confusion. Zhang Cheng muttered from across the room, obviously, but before he could finish, Lucas snatched the pen out of his chest. "Pocket." "Lucas Shaw!" Zhang shouted. "You lost the argument and stole my pen?" Lucas waved without turning around. "Lost the fight." Zhang clutched his empty pocket like a wounded child. "If you lost, Take. His pen. Why mine? After morning rounds, Julian was prepping to scrub in for surgery when Lucas blocked his path again. Julian frowned. Lucas handed him a bottle of glucose. Drink this. You're not stepping into the ore until you do. Are you serious? Julian asked. You're blackmailing me with glucose? Lucas said nothing, just stood there, immovable as a wall, grinning like a tiger in a white coat. Julian didn't bother arguing. He twisted the cap and chugged it down in one go. Then, peering through his lenses, he fixed Lucas with a look. That look. It reminded Lucas of the night they drank together at Hell Bar. Same eyes, same weight. He hadn't noticed back then the small beauty mark beneath Julian's eye, but he saw it now. Then, all at once, a familiar weight landed in his palm. Julian shoved the empty bottle into Lucas's hand and said, "Can I go now?" He stepped past Lucas, brushing against him. Just as he reached the end of the hallway, Lucas called out, "Julian." Julian turned, clearly impatient. Lucas walked over, reached into his coat pocket, and slipped something into Julian's pocket. Then, pretending nothing had happened, he walked away, hands in pocket, like it was just another day. Julian reached in and paused. It was a handwritten letter, or more precisely, an apology note. Later that day, Tang Ke was doubled over laughing, clutching the note. "Oh my God," he wheezed. "I never thought I'd live to see a formal apology from Lucas Shaw." He read dramatically, "Apology letter from Lucas Shaw. Last night, under the influence of alcohol, I said something that upset Julian Grant. Hereby submit this written apology." Before he could finish reading, Julian snatched the whole stack of letter paper back. The pages were printed on official red and white hospital stationery with Jihua Hospital, affiliated with a medical university across the top. Lucas's handwriting, usually fast and messy, was surprisingly neat. Not a single rushed scrawl. 5 pages, all filled. At the back was an attached surgical proposal. Last night, Lucas had said he'd draft it tonight. Apparently he hadn't slept. Julian asked himself, why? Tang tapped the proposal thoughtfully. He wrote an apology. "You two should really end this Cold War. He's the one doing your surgery. Remember?" Julian lowered his eyes. "What's with that look?" Tang asked. "Wait, Julian, don't tell me you've changed your mind?" He knew Julian well. If Julian were firmly set on not keeping the baby, he'd have been rushing to discuss the procedure by now. Thinking back on how calm Julian had been on the phone last night, Tang had assumed he was just emotionally reserved. But now, "It's only been a month, Julian," Tang said. He remembered how anxious Julian had been when the pregnancy was first confirmed, how he'd badgered Tang daily about the publication timeline. Now, his hesitation was palpable. "You're not seriously thinking of keeping the baby, are you?" Tang asked. "You do know what that means for you?" Julian paused. "I know." Tang looked at him warily. "Did something happen?" "You're not usually indecisive. You make choices fast and clean." Julian pressed a hand to his forehead. "Tang, give me some time. I just need to be sure of what I want." The golden evening sun slanted through the blinds, casting light across the dark red conference table where rows of doctors in white coats sat, their eyes locked on the projected slides at the front. As the speaker gave thanks, a round of applause filled the room. Julian Grant gently placed the laser pointer down, stepped away from the projection screen, and returned to his seat at the table. At the head of the long table sat Director Monroe. Julian was seated just down from her, and as he looked up, met the eyes of Lucas Shaw across the room. They had each just presented a report. Julian on Dr. Ken's surgical procedure, Lucas on the case analysis. Presentations like this were second nature to Julian, as routine as eating or breathing. The only difference this time was that he shared the same condition as the patient. In the case, you both did well, said Director Monroe. Clear and well prepared, especially on such short notice. She chuckled. Tell me honestly, you knew about this case in advance, didn't you? Her tone was teasing, but for a split second, Julian and Lucas exchanged a glance that lingered before quickly breaking away. Thankfully, she didn't notice. Julian, she said, if we had a patient like this at Jihua, do you think you could handle the surgery? She turned to Lucas as well. And you? I'd give it a try, Julian said. No problem, Lucas replied. They spoke nearly in unison. Monroe raised an eyebrow at Lucas. You're more confident than Julian. Lucas looked straight at Julian as he responded, I'll give it my all. Though they were both seated on the same side as Monroe, Julian could tell Lucas wasn't speaking to their director. He was speaking to him, just like he had in that handwritten apology, just like he had last night. Lucas had even said, if Julian preferred to go abroad for the surgery, he would cover all the expenses. Julian didn't know why, but that had irritated him. Maybe he hated how Lucas always acted on his own, assuming what was best, just like Lucas hated his controlling tone and refusal to be questioned. Julian was still staying at Tonki's place. Lucas hadn't asked when he would come back. After wrapping up the next day's surgery schedule, Julian checked the clock. It was already past 8 p.m. Normally, he'd stay late, maybe catch up on extra work. But today, he felt distracted, unfocused. So he packed up early and headed out. On his way, he glanced over at Lucas's desk, empty. Lowering his eyes, Julian walked to the hospital entrance and prepared to call a cab. It was the most crowded area, the best place to get a ride. As he stood near the curb, something suddenly bumped him from behind. He turned in surprise and found himself face to face with a rabbit taller than he was. A giant pink rabbit, ears flopped down, identical to the one that had lived on his bed for years. It took a moment to realize the rabbit was holding flyers, a costumed employee. In recent years, a city had seen a boom in shops and businesses. To stay competitive, many stores pulled all kinds of tricks. Costumed staff weren't uncommon. Usually, the goal was to attract kids. Once the kids whined, the parents would be dragged in too. Maybe it was too late in the evening, or maybe this particular employee was new and didn't know how to draw a crowd. But for some reason, they had chosen Julian. He pushed the flyer back toward the rabbit and waved it off. Not interested, but the rabbit was persistent, repeatedly trying to hand it to him. Julian figured they probably had some quota to meet, so he reluctantly accepted it and gave it a quick glance. That's when he saw it. This wasn't just any shop. It was Xianju, the priciest restaurant near Jihua Hospital. Xianju didn't charge by dish but by head, 1,288 yuan per person. Roughly, one full day's wages for Julian. His parents were humble workers back in B City. He hadn't come from wealth. Over the years, most of his salary and bonuses had gone into his home, his car, and other big expenses. Dining at Xianju wasn't part of his usual routine. He remembered Xianju's business had always been good. A city was never short on rich people. What had changed? Why were they handing out flyers now? He began to suspect this staff member might not be legit. Before he could say anything, the rabbit pulled out a cylindrical bamboo tube filled with fortune sticks and offered it to him. Julian instinctively took a step back, but the rabbit didn't follow. It just stood there, head down, holding out the tube like a silent, fuzzy statue. Even with the oversized mask, Julian couldn't see the person inside. And yet, he inexplicably felt the rabbit looked pitiful. Maybe it was because it resembled the old plush bunny he'd had for so long. With a sigh of resignation, he reached out and drew a stick. At once, the rabbit's head perked up like it had come to life. Julian almost laughed. It looked happy. He pulled the small paper tied to the end of the stick, unrolled it, and, after a long pause, looked at the rabbit again. expression unreadable. "Lucas Shaw," he said, voice dry. "Do you have nothing better to do?" The paper read, "Forgive a friend you recently fought with, and enjoy a free gourmet meal at our establishment." Julian drew a few more sticks. They all said the same thing. He tossed them back in the tube and turned to flag down a cab. But Lucas had already removed the rabbit head and grabbed his wrist, still wearing the fuzzy pink sleeve. "I'm not messing around," Lucas said. "I just wanted to have dinner with you." Even though it was late autumn, the suit was hot. He was drenched in sweat, his black hair clinging to his forehead. He wiped his brow and glanced sideways at Julian with a sheepish grin. "I already apologized. I gave you my apology letter. I promise I won't piss you off anymore." He pointed toward the restaurant. "Come on. I already booked the table." Julian shoved the flyer back into his chest. "Come on," Lucas said. "I spent days in the OR to earn enough for this. You've got to at least show up." He knew Julian wasn't the kind to waste money, even if he didn't want to. See Lucas? He wouldn't let him blow cash for nothing. Sure enough, Julian, thinking about those lost wages, reluctantly followed him into Xianju. The restaurant was as elegant as ever, designed with private rooms, serene lighting, and full privacy. But the moment Julian saw the table, he paused. A bouquet of 99 red roses sat at the center. Julian turned his head slowly. "The flowers? I bought them," Lucas said. "Costume, flowers, dinner," Julian listed. Then, deadpan, "This has to be the cheesiest apology ever." Only thing missing was a heart-shaped candlelight confession on the sidewalk. "It's cheesy?" Lucas looked genuinely betrayed. "I paid 250 yuan on Taobao for this apology plan, handcrafted by a top-rated relationship coach." He pulled out his phone to prove it, but Julian pushed it back. "Did you know yellow roses are for apologies?" "I did," Lucas admitted. "But the coach swore red ones had better results." 250. Wow. Julian suddenly recalled a recent rant from Wu Rui, who had been killing himself with surgeries and clinics, only for his pregnant wife to spend an entire month's salary on some so-called top-tier prenatal class. Apparently, she claimed education needed to begin in the womb now. Julian couldn't understand what kind of spell these experts were casting. He looked at Lucas's clearly once brilliant brain and thought, this guy is exactly the type phone scammers would love when he gets old. So he deadpanned, "You can keep the money. Give it to someone who actually needs help." It really was cheesy? Lucas looked genuinely crushed. Julian, about to shake his head, paused mid-motion. "But at least you came," Lucas said, recovering slightly. "I was scared I'd get paged before you showed up." He was on third call backup duty that night. Normally, third call shifts didn't require you to stay on hospital grounds, but at Jihua, with their sheer volume of patients, even third-line doctors stayed close. Lucas had kept an eye on his phone the whole time, ready to run. "Why tonight?" Julian asked. "The bunny suit just arrived," Lucas said. "I had it custom-made to match the one on your bed. Was afraid you wouldn't notice me in time. Though, you still didn't." He pouted. "I watched you walk right past me like I was invisible. Had to tap your shoulder to get your attention." Julian sighed. "You could have waited until tomorrow." "I didn't want to wait even one more day," Lucas said quietly. "Every morning, I see you skip breakfast, and I'm scared your stomach will act up again." As if on cue, the waiter arrived, carrying a dark wooden tray. One by one, he laid the dishes out. Silken tofu, poached cabbage and clear broth. Buddha jumps over the wall. Every single one was gentle on the stomach. Julian opened his mouth to ask, "Why are you so worried about me?" but stopped himself. His mind flashed back to the slip of paper inside the fortune stick. The word friend. Did Lucas already think of himself as Julian's friend? Or did he only see Julian as a friend? He had planned to ask. But before he could, Lucas's phone rang. The gods of timing never failed. Jiwa's infamous jinx had struck again. It was the hospital. Lucas picked up, then stood while peeling off the rabbit suit. Start. Without me. Don't. Wait. What case? Bed 23, triplets. I told the night shift to call me no matter what. Julian nodded. He remembered that patient, an older first-time mother. Carrying triplets. Complicated case. They'd discussed her multiple times, in meetings. She had refused selective reduction despite the risks. The team had recommended a C-section, but she'd insisted on a natural birth. In the end, they decided to try. But in a hospital, the doctor never gets the final say. Lucas had been walking a tightrope the entire time. I gotta go, Lucas said, stuffing the costume into its head. He paused at the door and turned back. Sorry for messing this up. Let me make it up to you tomorrow. I'll think of something else. No need, Julian replied. Lucas blinked. You're not mad anymore? Julian shot him a look. Bed 23 is waiting. Grinning, Lucas waved. Talk later then? Julian watched him go, then glanced down at the silky tofu floating like chrysanthemum petals in broth, dotted with goji berries. After a while, he set his chopsticks down and told the server, pack it up. Watching the delicate arrangement disappear into plain takeout boxes felt like watching a pearl get buried in sand. Suddenly, it all looked like ordinary food. He twitched his lips. 1,299 yuan. At least 1,000 of that had to be for the plating. Would you like a wrapper for the roses? The server asked politely. Julian started to say no, but stopped. The flowers were fresh, still fragrant, still in full bloom. When Julian walked back into the office carrying the bouquet, he still didn't know why he hadn't thrown it out. He stood at the doorway for a moment. Just then, the janitor passed by. He started to move forward to toss the flowers, but a familiar voice interrupted him. Dr. Grant, who gave you roses? Julian froze. It was Yu Sang. He turned slowly. In that 1 second of hesitation, the janitor had already walked off. So now he was stuck, standing in the doorway, holding a bouquet of red roses. Promo gift, he muttered. What kind of restaurant gives out this many roses? Yu Sang grinned. Come on. You're definitely being chased. Want them? They're yours. No way. My girlfriend would kill me. Julian didn't respond. He glanced at Lucas's desk, empty. His coat and bunny suit were crumpled on the chair. He placed the takeout on his desk and headed to the delivery ward. Jiwa's delivery wing was always loud. Beds lined up side by side. Midwives calling out, mothers groaning in pain. It was a symphony of life and chaos. Julian scanned the room. Where's bed 23? The nurse replied, fetal breach. Not looking good. Dr. Shaw called for a C-section. They just moved her to the OR. Breach meant the baby's butt, not head, was entering the birth canal. First, it's not ideal, and in triplets, especially dangerous. Julian was surprised. Bed 23 and her family had always been obstinate. She was in too much pain, the nurse said. Dr. Shaw talked her into it. She finally agreed. Her family wasn't thrilled, but he had her sign the consent herself. Julian nodded and returned to the office. After a while, estimating the surgery should be ending soon, he carried the takeout box to the OR break room to reheat it. Just as he untied the plastic bag, rapid footsteps echoed in the hall. A nurse's panicked voice rang out. Code Blue. We need the crash team now. Julian's hand slipped. The box fell back onto the table. A minute earlier, operating room. The third baby had just been delivered. Lucas Shaw cut the umbilical cord. As the nurse took the newborn, he put down the surgical scissors and said to the team, "Good work, everyone." Then he turned to the mother in bed 23 and offered her a warm smile. "You did great too." The patient's name was Qin Wang. At his words, she relaxed, her sweat damp hair clinging to her temples, looking both exhausted and elated. Thanks to the lower body anesthesia, she still felt no pain. Lost in the joy of a successful delivery, her lips curled into a faint smile. Triplets almost never reach full term, and Qin Wang was no exception. The babies had only been shown to her briefly before being placed in incubators and taken to the NICU. As her smile began to fade, Lucas offered comfort. "You'll see them again, soon. Don't be sad." Qin Wang nodded and let out a soft sigh, but moments later, her brow furrowed and she gave a quiet cough. Lucas had just been inspecting her uterus, waiting for the placenta to be delivered. At the sound, his gaze paused. Then she coughed again. A dry sound, nothing unusual on its own, but Lucas's pupils contracted. Instantly. "Prepare for intubation," he said sharply. "Huh?" The anesthetist froze. Quickly, Lucas snapped. "Now." As soon as the anesthetist brought over the intubation equipment, Qin Wang's eyes rolled back and her body began convulsing. Lucas looked up at the monitor. Barely a second passed before the alarm screamed to life. All her vitals plummeted at a terrifying speed. Then 4 cold zeros appeared on the monitor. P. Pulse, 0 BPM. R. Heart rate, 0 BPM. BP. Blood pressure, 0 mmHg. SpO2. Oxygen saturation, 0%. Cardiac and respiratory arrest. The piercing alarm hit everyone like a hammer. Chaos erupted. 2 milligrams epinephrine, divided dose 4th dexamethasone, 20 milligrams, push. Lucas shouted. His hands overlapped, pressing down on the center of Qin Wang's chest. With rhythmic force, blood pooled from her uterus. The tube slid down her trachea. The ventilator hissed to life. Beads of sweat rolled from Lucas's brow. CPR was brutal. He was drenched in minutes. "Another dose of epi," he ordered, glancing at the monitor. 4 milligrams IV push, split dose. Theophylline, 125 milligrams. Alert the emergency team. Inform the family. We're issuing a critical condition. Notice, it's amniotic fluid embolism. The news spread like wildfire. Julian Grant's jaw clenched. His heart pounded like a war drum. In obstetrics, 2 things were most feared: postpartum hemorrhage and amniotic fluid embolism. It was rare. It had no warning signs. Its symptoms were hard to detect. Its onset was lightning fast. Death could occur within a single minute. There was often no time to respond. Any woman could develop it, with no clear cause, no screening, no prevention. Its fatality rate was terrifying. Doctors called it death's lottery. If you were the one drawn, your odds were 1 in 10 to survive. Some even joked, saving 1 amniotic embolism patient was enough. Bragging rights for a lifetime. "Dr. Grant!" Julian snapped around. A nurse rushed toward him, eyes wide. "Dr. Lee. Went to speak with the family. It's gotten ugly. Can you come?" Julian strode to the front entrance of the OR. As he approached, he heard, shouting, "We told you she was delivering naturally. You people forced her into surgery just to make money. And now she's in critical condition?" A man lunged at Dr. Lee, furious. "Get me that Dr. Shaw." It was his decision. "I swear if he doesn't come out, I'll kill him." Dr. Lee tried to calm him. "Sir, please, we're doing all we can. This was a sudden embolism." The man punched him hard in the face. "Bring me your director." Dr. Lee stumbled back, clutching his cheek. The man raised his fist again. Julian caught it mid-air. The man squinted at him. "You the director?" Julian's face was cold. "Critical doesn't mean dead. Dr. Shaw is doing everything he can. He doesn't have time to fight you." "Fight? What's the point? You're just stalling to milk more money out of us," the man shouted. "He's the one who pushed for a C-section. If anything happens, he's paying for it." Julian took a deep breath. "No one wants this." Amniotic fluid embolism. Can't be predicted. It's... The man lunged again. Dr. Lee tried to step in, but Julian shoved him aside and ducked the punch. Pointing at the man, Julian snapped, "Calm down. Your wife isn't dead yet. Dr. Shaw hasn't given up." "Why are you..." "Dr. Grant." "Enough," Dr. Lee whispered, tugging his sleeve. "You weren't in the OR. Her vitals were..." "It's probably too late." Julian stared at him. "He'll save her," he said hoarsely. "He will, even if he didn't. It wouldn't be his fault." The hallway was chaos. Julian scrubbed in, stood at the OR entrance, foot poised on the sensor pad, but paused. He took a breath, stepped back. A crowded OR helped no one. Lucas was inside. He'd make the right calls. Julian returned to the changing room, but didn't open his locker. Instead, he sank to the floor against the wall. He had faced emergencies before, but he'd always been the one performing the rescue. This time, he was outside, and it was worse. He wasn't just worried for the patient. He was worried for Lucas. He tilted his head back, resting against the cold tile. For once, the chill helped. Inside, Lucas pressed down on Chin Wang's chest, arms burning. 7 minutes of CPR had left him shaking. Usually, he joked during surgery. Not today. Everyone's face was grim. Drugs in, no response. Lucas's vision blurred with sweat. His arms screamed. Still, he didn't stop. Then, finally, the monitor flickered. "Vitals returning," cried Zhang Cheng, voice cracking. "Heart rate's back. Heart rate, 112 BPM. BP, 150 110ths. mmHg, the placenta detached. Maintain vasopressors," Lucas said through gritted teeth. Sweat stung. His eyes. The nurse wiped his face. Lucas disinfected his hands, grabbed a needle. The Heyman suture stopped the bleeding. Oxygen levels stabilized. Check the abdominal cavity. Muscles purple. Widespread bleeding. Subfascial bleeding too, Zhang reported. Lucas was silent. Then, prepare for subtotal hysterectomy. Get consent from the family. 2 hours later, the patient was wheeled to the ICU. Alive. Julian sat outside. Hearing the gurney approach, he looked up and saw Lucas enter the changing room. Lucas looked drained, his gown soaked, cap clinging to his sweat slicked forehead. Their eyes met. Lucas said nothing. No surprise. No greeting. He simply stepped forward and crouched in front of Julian, meeting his gaze. Neither spoke. After a long pause, Julian reached up and pulled off Lucas's mask. Red marks lined his face. His cheeks flushed from heat. Lucas didn't resist, just stared back. "I'm exhausted," he whispered. "You saved her?" Julian asked softly. Lucas smiled, eyes crinkling. "Yeah." Before Julian could respond, Lucas suddenly scooped him up. "What the hell are you doing? There were chairs. Why were you sitting on the floor?" Lucas snapped. "I heard you defended me to the family, argued for me. Even Mahao didn't get that." "Put me down," Julian growled, fists clenched. Lucas set him in a chair. "Sit on the floor again and I'll carry you through. The entire hospital. You trying to die? You shouldn't have argued with them. If they file a complaint, the health bureau will review it. That guy busted Lee's tooth. Could have hurt you too." Julian hadn't planned to argue, but hearing Chin Wang's husband curse. Lucas. Something snapped. He didn't know why. He just couldn't stay quiet. "Is Lee okay?" he asked. Lucas smirked. "Now you care about him? I thought you were sticking up. For me, he's fine. That tooth was rotting anyway. He was gonna pull it. This just sped it up." Julian looked down. Lucas glanced at the takeout. "Let's eat, huh?" He reheated the food, opened the box. "You didn't touch it?" he asked. "Was it bad?" Julian rolled his eyes. Lucas laughed. "You're too good to me." Julian stood. Lucas caught his sleeve. "Come home," he said seriously. "Please." Julian's heart skipped. The look in Lucas's eyes was too raw. Lucas went on, "I worked so hard fixing your stomach. Now you're wrecking it again. Come back. Follow doctor's orders. Eat well, okay?" "Who asked you to worry about my stomach?" "Instinct," Lucas said. "Doctor's reflex. Go Nagu sang instead. He learned it from you," Lucas said. "So as their role model, Dr. Grant, shouldn't you set a better example?" Julian shot him a look. "Then button your damn lab coat. Your team copies you too." Director Monroe's chewed them out 3 times. "Button it for me then? Shameless. You can take it off, but not put it on." "Lucas Shaw." Julian jumped up, but Lucas just grinned. "Relax. You took it off yourself that night." Julian choked. He had no idea what made Lucas so delusional to think they were close enough to joke like that. Worse, he'd guessed right. Julian had removed that coat. Damn. Julian stormed off. Lucas scrambled after him. Catching his sleeve, Lucas softened his voice. "I was really wrong, Julian. I'm sorry. Please, forgive me." He hesitated, then said, "I kind of missed you."
If this chapter moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Nova Media. Thanks for listening.